Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kuja Vihari Jaya Govi Chalavarava Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Bhajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Ram Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtaudatara Srimad, His Divine Loving Grace, Abhaya Charanadavinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrita Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet Nastapreshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Babaji Naishtaki. Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter number 21, Instructions by Prithu Maharaj, text number 30. Maybe someone can in my phone.
Where is it number?
I think it's probably sitting on the counter on the counter over there, or on the cash register. My phone. Yeah, thank you. The print's a little small, especially if the sun is directly in your eyes.
I think you're just getting old.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so. Thou hit Radin Rite Mrityo Shauchan Dharma Vimohitan Varga Swarga Parvarganam Prayenaikatmya Hetuna. Thou hit Radin Rite Mrityo Shauchan Dharma Vimohitan Varga Swarga Pavarganam Prayenaikatmya Hetuna. Thou hit Radin Rite Mrityo Shauchan Dharma Vimohitan Varga Swarga Pavarganam Prayenaikatmya Hetuna.
Thou hit Radin Rite Mrityo
Thou hit Radin Rite Mrityo
Shauchan Dharma Vimohitan
Shauchan Dharma Vimohitan
Varga Swargapavarganam.
Varga Swarga Pavarganam.
Prayenakatmya hetuna.
Prayanakatmya hetuna. Thou hitradin rite mrityo. Sauchyan dharma vimohitan. Varga Swarga Pavarganam. Prayanakatmya hetuna. Word for word. Davitra Adin. Grandsons like my father Vena. Rite. Accept. Mrityo. Of death personified. Okay. Sauchan. Abominable. Dharma vimohitan. Bewildered on the path of religion. Varga. Religion. Economic development. Sense gratification. And liberation. Swarga. Elevation to the heavenly planets. Apavarganam. Being freed from material contamination. Prayena. Almost always. Eka. One. Atmya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hetuna. On account of. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Although abominable persons like my father, Vena, the grandson of death personified, are bewildered on the path of religion, all the great personalities like those mentioned agree that in this world, the only bestower of benedictions of religion, economic development, sense gratification, liberation, or elevation to the heavenly planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. King Vena, the father of Prithu Maharaj, was condemned by the Brahmanas and saintly persons because of his denying the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and rejecting the method of satisfying him by performance of Vedic sacrifice. In other words, he was an atheist who did not believe in the existence of God and who consequently stopped all Vedic ritualistic ceremonies in his kingdom. Prithu Maharaj considered King Vena's character abominable because Vena was foolish regarding the execution of religious performances. Atheists are of the opinion that there is no need to accept the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be successful in religion, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation. According to them, dharma, or religious principles, are meant to establish an imaginary God to encourage one to become moral, honest, and just, so that the social orders may be maintained in peace and tranquility. Furthermore, they say that actually there is no need to accept God for this purpose, for if one follows the principles of morality and honesty, that is sufficient. Similarly, if one makes nice plans and works very hard for economic development, automatically the result of economic development will come. Similarly, sense gratification also does not depend on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For if one earns enough money by any process, one will have sufficient opportunity for sense gratification. Insofar as liberation is concerned, they say that there is no need to talk of liberation because after death, everything is finished. Prithu Maharaj, however, did not accept the authority of such atheists, headed by his father, who was the grandson of death personified. Generally, a daughter inherits the qualities of her father, and a son gets the qualities of his mother. Thus, Mrityu's daughter, Sunita, got all the qualities of her father, and Venas inherited the qualities of his mother. A person who is always subjected to rules and regulations of repeated birth and death cannot accommodate anything beyond materialistic ideas. Since King Vena was such a man, he did not believe in the existence of God. Modern civilization agrees with the principles of King Vena, but factually, if we scrutinize and we study all the conditions of religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, we must accept the principles of the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to the Vedic literatures, religion consists only of the codes of law given by God. If one does not accept the authority of the Supreme Godhead in matters of religion and morality, One must explain why two persons of the same moral standard achieve different results. Why do good things happen to bad? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? It is generally found that even if two men have the same moral standards of ethics, honesty, and morality, their positions are still not the same. Similarly, in economic development, it is seen that if two men work very hard day and night, still the results are not the same. One person may enjoy great opulence without even working, whereas another person, although working very hard, does not even get 2 sufficient meals a day. Similarly, in the matter of sense gratification, sometimes one who has sufficient food is still not happy in his family affairs, or sometimes is not even married. Whereas another person, even though not economically well off, has the greatest opportunity for sense gratification. Even an animal like the hog or a dog may have a greater opportunity for sense gratification than a human being. Aside from liberation, even if we consider only the preliminary necessities of life, dharma, artha, and kama, religion, economic development, and sense gratification, we will see that they are not the same for everyone. Therefore, it must be accepted that there is someone who determines the different standards. In conclusion, not only for liberation must one depend on the Lord, but even for ordinary necessities in this material world. Priti Maharaj therefore indicated that in spite of having rich parents, children are sometimes not happy. Similarly, in spite of valuable medicine administered by a competent physician, sometimes a patient dies. Or in spite of having a big safe boat, sometimes a man drowns. We may thus struggle to counteract the impediments offered by material nature, but our attempts cannot be successful unless we are favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada Aki Jai. Om Jnana-tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master is opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavani Pashtacha Deshatarane Namaste Jivanandaya Dasaya Vanacharine Prabhupada Vallabhaya Singha Silavanodine Agyanadvantagramanam Pashtacha Patitatmanam Gyana Gurute Chitaharine Chakshashe Namaha. So, beautiful purport and verse. This is such a classic in and out of the ballpark Hare Krishna verse. So, what we're seeing is King Prithu enlightening the citizens, the sages, all those present in transcendental knowledge, because he is a first-class devotee of the Lord and is actually a Shakti Vesh avatar of the Lord, who's come to reestablish the principles of religion, because King Vena, his father, who was the grandson of death, had degraded religion so seriously, so intensely. King Vena was a psychopath who was killing his playmates as a child. Even as a child, he was murdering his playmates. And, actually, I love the Bhagavatam for many reasons. One of them is that you get these beautiful instances of things we see today happening literally thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, millions of years ago. We think, oh, today's times are so bad. Well, the material world is bad, let me tell you, because King Vena was a child psychopath. He was a serial killer. He was nuts. He was murdering Brahmins, hateful of the personality of Godhead. Similarly, we see that the oldest recorded instance of a near-death experience is the story of Ajamil. So why is this relevant to this verse? Is because Yamaraj, as Dhira Prabhu was so eloquently speaking yesterday, is one of the 12 Mahajans, or authorities on spiritual life. So Yamaraj is the Lord of death, not death personified, but the Lord of the world of death. He's administering people's karma and sending them to where they need to go. Although he has such a untasteful task, he is one of the Mahajans, or one of the greatest devotees of the Lord in the universe. And so Ajamil was a Brahmin, and he was raised very piously. He was raised with religious and moral standards. He used to practice worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. But one day he saw a prostitute embracing her lover. And just by that vision, just by that contamination of seeing this, he became degraded, and he also found a prostitute and became very entangled with her. And in that entanglement, he performed so many unrighteous and impious activities to support his so-called family, to support his nefarious activities. And so Ajamil became very, very degraded. And it's described elaborately in the 6th canto, some of the things he was doing. So Ajamil was very, very degraded. And actually, of course, the time of death came, and Ajamil was leaving his body. And it's described that he saw the Yamadutas. We saw the Yamadutas, and the Yamadutas are the agents of death. They are the beings that are tasked with taking the subtle body and the soul from the gross body, dragging it to the place of Yamaraj, and essentially doing everything that is not so nice to the consciousness, so that the consciousness can be refitted, reconditioned to its next body. So they're torturers. They're the authorized torturers of the world, of the universe. And so it's described by our Ganesham Prabhu, who is a devotee in New York. And you can hear a really wonderful Wisdom of the Sages podcast with Ganesham Prabhu. He's a chaplain in one of New York's biggest hospitals. And he was a brahmachari for many years in the New York temple. And he described that many, many people, Christians, Hindus, Jews, they see the Yamadutas at the time of death. They see them coming, and they describe them exactly as they're described in the Vedas. And he actually went to the senior chaplain and spoke of this phenomenon. And the senior chaplain, who had been doing this for many, many years, said, "Oh yes, this has been happening my entire career. People see these beings shrouded in black and with their hounds coming to rip the soul from the body with the ropes of Yamaraj and tear it out of the body to the planet of Yamaraj, where it is, going to go through so much suffering so it can be reconditioned to go to its next body." So Ajamil was seeing these beings, and as he was seeing these beings, he was terrified. He was horribly frightened. And he had one baby son named Narayan, which is one of the names of Krishna, of course. And he yelled out, "Narayan, Narayan." And so by that yelling of the holy name, which was Namabas, it's described by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Harinam Chintamani, that there's 3 types of chanting. There's Shuddhanam, pure chanting of the holy name. There's Namabas, which is purifying chanting, or chanting with lessening offenses. The offenses are being purified. And there's Namaparad, which is offensive chanting. So offensive chanting is not very potent at all, whereas Namabas is extremely potent. There's so many benedictions, including liberation, that come with Namabas. But that's not the goal of chanting the holy name. The goal of chanting the holy name is pure love of Godhead. So that can only come with Shuddhanam, or pure chanting. So if one chants Namabas, then one, runs away or moves away all the inauspicious things that can be affecting one. So it's very, very powerful if one can even just chant Namabas, which is not Shuddhanam, it's not pure chanting, but it's still so powerful. It's described that just as one claps their hands, so many birds will fly out of a tree by chanting this Namabas chanting. So many sinful reactions, so many inauspicious things are removed from our hearts, just like birds flying out of the tree. So Ajamil, he said, "Narayan, Narayan." And immediately the Vishnu Dutas appeared, or the servants of Lord Vishnu. Essentially, what I would think in terms of, people say different things about the Christian paradigm, what is an angel? But I always think of the Vishnu Dutas as the real equivalent of an angel, because they're servants of God, they protect the devotees, they're personal attendants to Lord Vishnu or Lord Narayan. And they also appear to protect the devotees, and Prabhupada says that in one of the purports in the sixth canto. So the Vishnu Dutas appear, and there's an argument that takes place between the Yamadutas, the servants of Yamaraj, the servants of death, and the servants of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, about where should this man go. And of course, the Vishnu Dutas are successful and protect Ajamil from being taken to the planet of Yamaraj. And this creates a very, very big disturbance in the Yamadutas. They're very disturbed because they're just trying, they're just like trying to do their job. They're like, we're just trying to do our job. And these guys are so powerful. They come and, don't allow us to do our job. So they're very, very disturbed. And they went to Yamaraj, and it's actually described that they were actually suicidal. They were saying, we're going to kill ourselves because we can't understand what's going on here. We thought you were the supreme, and now we're seeing that these guys just beat us up, and you can't do anything about it. They run us away like we're nothing. And so Yamaraj then begins to speak very enlightening verses on religion. And in one of those verses, he describes that religion can only be given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So real religion is not a concoction. Real religion is given by God himself. That is what real religion is. So all other methods of religion or concoctions that aren't essentially given by God himself are materialistic, and they ultimately don't cause liberation. They don't create auspiciousness. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Moga Shya Moga Karmano, Moga Jnana Vichetasa, Rakshashim Asurim Chaiva, Mohinim Prakritim Shritaha. That anybody who's practicing these religions without Krishna, it's without God, without devotion to God. It's their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge is defeated because they're taking shelter of atheistic and demonic views. So religion is given by God, and so what we're seeing here is King Prithu is confirming this fact. He's saying that those who are atheists, those who are asuras, they're denying the existence of God, and they're trying for the goals of material life, this economic development, sense gratification, liberation, religion. They're trying for these things without acknowledging God's source in everything, and therefore they're always defeated, and therefore they create a lot of suffering in the world. So just to touch back momentarily on the Namabas thing, Ajamil's Namabas just came to me. It's kind of a nice point, is that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's one nice, beautiful part where Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya, is speaking, and he's explaining the glories of the holy name. He's saying that by chanting the holy name, one can be liberated. He says by chanting the holy name once, one can be liberated. One time. And one Smarta Brahman became very furious. How could you say that? I work so hard. I meditate for so many years, follow all the Vedic rules and regulations, do so much austerity, and you're saying that just by chanting the holy name of Krishna one time, I can be liberated? Haridas Thakur said that's what the scriptures say. And actually, Haridas Thakur, he illuminated even further. He said that, that's not even the goal of chanting the holy name. The goal of chanting the holy name is pure love of Godhead. So chanting the holy name isn't even our goal. Is not even liberation when we chant. Our goal is to have pure love for Krishna. Haridas Thakur explains that. And this Brahmin challenges him and says that, he actually had a very beautiful nose. It's described that he challenged Haridas that, if that's the case, then my nose will fall off. And the next day he got leprosy and his nose melted off. He offended Haridas Thakur, the great devotee of the Lord. So, continuing on. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvapavartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samagvitaha. I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service with all their hearts. So this is the one of the quintessential verses of the Bhagavad Gita, one of the Chatra Shloki verses. Krishna is describing that one who understands that he is the source of everything engages in his devotional service with all their heart, with all his heart. So Krishna is elucidating the fact that he is the source of everything, that he is God, that everything comes from him, and that we have to know this. So much of our process in Krishna consciousness is simply understanding Krishna, understanding who Krishna is. Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatpataha tvaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti sorjana. He says that if you understand the nature of my appearance and activities, then you don't take birth in this world again, but you come to my eternal abode. So Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, time and time and time again, explains that you have to understand his position. That if you want liberation, if you want to go back to the spiritual world, if you want freedom from misery, you simply have to understand his position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you can understand that simple fact, then all of your misery is gone. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshvaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatam shantam richiti. Krishna is the proprietor of everything. He is the receiver of all sacrifices and all austerities. He's the friend and well-wisher of every living entity. And if you can understand all these things, you can become peaceful. So once again, we have to understand this fact of who is Krishna. And if we can understand that, then we can become very, very happy. So what's the process of doing that? Hearing and chanting. Because by hearing about Krishna, we can understand his glories, especially hearing from a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada. And the Parampara, Shukadev Goswami, we're hearing from the Srimad Bhagavatam. In that way, like we say every day, Nasta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. And by hearing this Bhagavatam regularly, if you hear Bhagavatam class every day, all that is troublesome in the heart is practically eradicated, and loving service to the personality of Godhead is established in the heart as an irrevocable fact. So once again, it's this hearing process that we can establish who is God, because we're hearing from the great authorities. And in that way, it becomes very easy to perform devotional service. Because the more we understand Krishna's greatness, the more we understand our smallness. And it becomes very easy to engage in the service of Krishna. So, Prabhupada says, so emphatically, he says, they say God is great, but they don't know how great is God. God is great, but how great is God? That's what we're actually studying. It's the postgraduate study of God. Everybody's studying God to say, oh, turns out God is great, guys. Didn't know that, but God is great. And then they were saying, but how great is God? And Krishna's glories are unlimited. It's actually described Krishna doesn't even understand his own glories. And he may understand his glories, but then his glories expand, so then he doesn't understand his own glories again. Ananta Shesh has been chanting Krishna's glories for eternity with unlimited heads. And he's chanting one glory, one time, on one unlimited head, and he never chants that glory again. And still, even though he's been chanting since time immemorial, he still hasn't come close to chanting all of Krishna's glories. So Krishna has unlimited glories. And we're so fortunate because we don't just get to understand God, we get to understand Krishna. That's where it really, really, really becomes mystical, where you're entering into a very confidential and wonderful realm of spiritual life. Because most people just think, God, oh, my dear God, give me this, my dear God, give me that. They worship, they love God. And then there is, okay, maybe God has a form. Maybe God has a name. And then there's so many names of God. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, once again, in the Harinam Chintamani, he describes that there's secondary names of God and there's primary names of God. So secondary names of God are like Bhagavan, Ishvara, God, Allah. Those are secondary names of God because they're describing what God is. Bhagavan, he is the possessor of all opulences. Ishvara, he is the controller of everything. God, he's the source of everything. Then there's primary names of God. That's describing who God is. Krishna, Govinda, Rama, Giridhari, Madhava. Those are direct names of God. So these direct names of God, these primary names of God, they're more potent. And when you chant them, they awaken a certain rasa or a certain relationship in your heart by which you can connect and relate with Krishna. So we have so much knowledge about God, about the source. And it's so fantastic that we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is elevating us from Krishna's lotus feet to Krishna's beautiful smiling face. And we understand Krishna's pastimes. Krishna's pastimes are so beautiful, so filled with love, so filled with mercy. And if we hear Krishna's pastimes, we become fully enlightened and fully gladdened. It's the nectar for which we were always anxious just by hearing Krishna's pastimes. Like our Parameshvara Prabhu explains that he listens to Krishna book practically 24 hours a day. Even when he sleeps, he's listening to Krishna book. And anytime he's not doing books or chanting, he's listening to Krishna book. So why is that? Why is he so absorbed in hearing the Krishna book? Because it's the summum bonum. It's the supreme activity of the soul to hear the pastimes of the Lord. And they're ever fresh, always pleasing. And they give the highest ecstasy. So we get to know all these beautiful details about God. Who are God's friends? What does God like to do? What are God's activities? And that's so wonderful. That's so powerful that we can understand and hear that. Because we can understand that if the source of everything is so beautiful and so wonderful as Krishna, then why are our lives not like that? What am I doing wrong? So that gives us the opportunity to really rectify ourselves, rectify our consciousness. So I was thinking, Srila Prabhupada, in this verse that I quoted, he made a beautiful purport, and I'll just read it. A learned scholar who has studied the Vedas, this is from 10.8 of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm the source of everything verse. A learned scholar who has studied the Vedas perfectly and has information from authorities like Lord Chaitanya, who knows how to apply these teachings, can understand that Krishna is the origin of everything, both in the material and spiritual worlds. And because he knows this perfectly, he becomes firmly fixed in devotional service of the Supreme Lord. So how do we become fixed up? We know devotional service brings us so much happiness. We can understand that doing the kirtan makes us happy, hearing the Bhagavatam makes us happy, taking prasad makes us happy. So how do we become fixed up in devotional service so that we're always happy at every moment? As Srila Prabhupada is describing, we have to study and understand perfectly by the teachings of the acharyas that Krishna is the origin of everything, both in the material and spiritual worlds. And because he knows this perfectly, he becomes firmly fixed in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. He can never be deviated by any amount of nonsensical commentaries or by fools. So if one is firmly fixed in the authority of the Vedas and in the authority of the acharyas, one can't be affected by foolish commentaries or untruth. There's a nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna describes that for someone who's enlightened or someone who's liberated or advanced soul, he becomes indifferent to all that is heard and all that is to be heard. He becomes indifferent to it because he's fixed in the truth. And so you see that in advanced devotees, that they hear so many things, people say so many ideas, but they're so fixed in the absolute truth of devotional service, and they're so fixed in their vision and their darshan of the Supreme Lord within the heart that they're no longer bothered by any of these indifferent commentaries. Like when I first became a devotee, Govinda Datta Prabhu, so merciful to me. And I said, Prabhu, yeah, this is so awesome. Krishna consciousness is so awesome. I love this stuff. Have you ever seen this? Show him I think I showed him the Flower of Life or some new agey thing. And he's just like, that's just circles. That's just circles. Because he's fixed up in the absolute truth. He's so fixed in devotional service. He's so happy in himself. So we can also be like that. Not that that's some people think, well, that's kind of we don't want to be like that. We just, we don't want to be we want to appreciate everything. The devotee appreciates everything in relation to Krishna. But when one knows Krishna, everything else becomes totally mundane. Because a devotee understands that no matter how many ways you analyze the material world, you can analyze it in geometry, you can analyze it by science, you can analyze it in so many ways, but it's ultimately going to endlessly modulate. There's no substance to it. It's temporary. Asato vidyate bhavo, nabhavo vidyate sataha, ubarapi drishnotas tvanyos tattvadarshibhi. It has no endurance. Asato vidyate bhavo. It has no endurance. Therefore, it's unreal. On the other hand, nasato vidyate bhavo. That which is eternal, the soul, has no change. So we see that science is definitely an illusion, because asato vidyate bhavo, it's always changing. But on the other hand, nasato vidyate bhavo, that which is eternal, that doesn't change. That's Krishna. That's this transcendental knowledge which has been the same since the beginning of time. Lord Brahma spoke it to Narada. Krishna spoke it to Brahma at the beginning of time. Then Narada heard it from Brahma. Narada spoke it to Vyas. It's been eternal. It hasn't changed. And it's kept alive in the parampara system. Evam parampara praptam imam rajasyo vidu sakale neha yogo nasta parantapaha. It's received by the saintly kings. So this is eternal knowledge. It doesn't change in time. All the Vedic literature agrees that Krishna is the source of Brahma, Shiva, and all other demigods. In the Artha Veda, it is said, I'm going to skip all the Sanskrit, it was Krishna who in the beginning instructed Brahma in the Vedic knowledge and who disseminated Vedic knowledge in the past. So then Prabhupada gives so many Vedic proofs that Krishna is the originator of all this transcendental knowledge. So everything is coming from Krishna. And we have to understand that. We have to understand that our knowledge comes from Krishna, our health comes from Krishna, all of the circumstances which are challenging us in the world come from Krishna. And we can see them in two ways. For someone who's a devotee, we can see that these challenges are given to us by Krishna to help us become more Krishna conscious. But if we're a non-devotee, we can see that they're just karma. So that's the difference between the consciousness of a devotee and a non-devotee. But ultimately what Prithvi Maharaj is saying that everybody is bewildered that are atheists because they want all these things like religion, economic development, sense gratification, liberation, elevation to the heavenly planets without the personality of Godhead. And we can see that's these are like big things, but even on a small level, we want a nice spouse, we want nice food, we want a nice job, we want so many things. But if we're not acknowledging Krishna's role, if we're not Krishna conscious, we're not conscious of Krishna's role, then what hope do we have of achieving anything? Simply our karma enacting on us. So we have to become Krishna conscious. We have to be aware of Krishna's role. And so surrender means accepting that Krishna is in control. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha. Krishna is the supreme controller of everything. He's Sarvakarana Karana means the cause of all causes. So if Krishna is the source of everything, Krishna is the controller of everything, then why do we struggle so hard to make things go our way? How many times have things went your way? Not one time. I don't think I've said one time in my life where things went my way.
I won a contest one time.
Yeah, okay, you had some good karma. Was it a sinful contest?
It was, I won a laptop and a cell phone and tablet. I don't think it was particularly sinful.
Okay. Well, we have that experience that so many times things don't go our way. Even if they go our way, then they're not what we really want. It doesn't satisfy us. So, people have the idea that this relationship is going to make me happy. I want this. I'm going to have this plan with my life. I'm going to do this and that. That doesn't make us happy. Because Krishna is in control. Krishna has his plan. And that's really what a surrendered soul accepts, is Krishna has his plan. And that our duty is Sarva Dharman Prityaja Mame Kam Sharanam Vraja. Our duty is to surrender to Krishna. Our duty is to become Krishna conscious. Savai Pumsam Paradharmo Yato Bhaktir Hoksajay. Our duty is to love Krishna. That's our supreme duty. No other duty in our life do we have but to love Krishna. So if we want anything else, if we try for anything else and it doesn't go our way, what can we really expect? So a surrendered soul focuses his energies on trying to love Krishna. He focuses his life on how to love Krishna. His life is dedicated in that way. And therefore he becomes peaceful. He knows that whatever is happening to me, Bhaktaram Yagitapasam, whatever I'm going through is for Krishna. He knows that Krishna is in control of everything. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. He knows that Krishna is my friend and my well-wisher. Therefore, he can become peaceful. He can become happy. So we have to understand Krishna is the source and Krishna is in control. And the more we can understand that, stop trying to make things go our way, but simply focus on pleasing Krishna, the more we'll be so enlivened and gladdened, and we'll have so much energy to continue doing service, because we're wasting and draining so much energy thinking how things aren't going my way. We're actually burning out so much of our vital energy by thinking about what I want, how things aren't going to go my way, what I desire. And if we become a pure devotee, like Srila Prabhupada, we actually follow in Prabhupada's footsteps and just perform our duty to serve Krishna, put all of our energies on that, then we'll be blessed with all auspiciousness from pure devotional service. So we can have that. We have to understand Krishna's position as being in control. And so he's the bestower of real benedictions. We have to approach him. And he's in our heart, so we can please him by acting in accordance with the scriptures, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And whatever we do, that's up to Krishna. We perform our duty without attachment to the results. Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham hridishani visto matasmritir jnanam apoanamcha vaidashcha shavir aham eva vedyo vedanta kridveda vedeva chaham. That he's within everybody's heart, and from him comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So if we want to remember Krishna, Krishna has to let us remember him. If we want to have Krishna consciousness, Krishna has to let us. So we have to please Krishna. And if we think like that, how am I going to please Krishna today? How am I going to make Krishna happy? Then we'll be in Vrindavan. I was just thinking about worshiping my Govardhan Shila. And I was watching some video of Kadamba Swami worship his Shila. He had said something that was really nice. He was saying, we're just in Krishna's world right now. He's, worshiping, he talks with the Shila, and we have no desire for ourselves. We're just simply making arrangements for Krishna's pleasure. And that's really what devotee means. It means we're making arrangements for Krishna's pleasure at every moment. Trying to make an arrangement for Krishna's pleasure. Not that we're thinking I'm going to practice devotional service and have a nice life and, I can live at the temple and, 3 hots in a cot. No, it means that we're actually actively trying to make an arrangement for Krishna's pleasure. Like the most blissful thing I've ever done was, organize that Rath Yatra. That was like really blissful. It was for Krishna's pleasure and for the pleasure of the devotees. And you feel so much ecstasy from that. So, we can do a little discussion for like a minute or two. Anybody have any points? Nam, Prabhu?
Let's go back to the passage this morning on economic development.
Yeah.
And tying that into this morning's reading in the Gita about being born into a wealthy family.
Yeah.
So could you speak on that a little bit?
Well, when you're wealthy, it makes it easier to practice God consciousness. Because if they're a pious wealthy family, that's the key word, pious wealthy family, not just wealthy family. Wealthy means, actually Lavanga was explained that aristocracy means, in that time then also follower of the Vedas, like civilized, classy people who are, following the Vedic principles. And so if you have that, wealth, if you're not worrying about how to eat, if you're not worrying about those things, then it becomes very easy to practice God consciousness. You can focus your energies. It was like, Ambarish Prabhu, he's the grandson of Henry Ford, and he's doing so much for Krishna. So in that way, we take birth in some family with some wealth, so it becomes very easy for us to practice God consciousness. Even me, I'm not saying I'm like pious or anything like that, but I'm saying, I grew up in not a poor family, but actually, we were kind of poor for American standards, but compared to the rest of the world, we're like, extraordinarily rich. And, I never had a night go hungry. I never had anything like that. I was, always taken care of. And because of that, I was able to, practice God consciousness and still comfortably practice God consciousness. I don't really worry about so many things because I have a lot of help from my family a lot of the time. So in that way, it's easier. And so that's what it means by that. So whether if someone's born in really horrible circumstances, it makes it very difficult. So yeah. Chandrika had a point them and
it seems like in order to really trust in Krishna, that Krishna is in control, it seems that we struggle with our minds in terms of patience, to be patient to see what Krishna is doing, because the mind says, okay, well, Krishna is not doing anything right now, so I have to be in control. Yeah. So just on that
Krishna
point.
said, Rupa Goswami says, Utsahan Nishchayan Daryat. So he says that we have to have confidence, enthusiasm, and patience. So patience is part of it. And I think that comes from, that's the mode of passion that we don't want to wait. We want something to happen right now. That's, influenced by the mode of passion. What helps me is like, I was talking with Ashram Swami Maharaj once, and I asked him if he ever got bored. Because when nothing's going on, you can get bored. And he's like, I don't even know what boredom is. I don't know what that is. He says, there's unlimited service to be done. And it kind of like hit me like, yeah, unlimited service to be done. He says, and if there was absolutely nothing to do, I always have my beads. And so in that way, it's like someone who's really Krishna conscious can be very patient because, yeah, maybe things aren't happening on this front right now, but because they have the vision to see that everything's absolute, that my chanting of japa, my worshiping the deity, my reading of the Bhagavatam, and whatever service I'm trying to perform in the world are all on an equal level and are all transcendental service to Krishna, they're able to just perform service like that. We see that Srila Prabhupada, what was he doing in times, long plane rides? He was just chanting japa. We took the ride with my spiritual master across the ocean to India, and he just chanted pretty much the whole time, chanted and rested. And so there's, plenty of opportunities to perform service if we just think of it like that my chanting is not just my 16 rounds, but I'm going to render some service by chanting right now. I'm going to render some service by reading right now. There's unlimited service. And so that's helped me a lot. It's thinking like that when it comes to like, I want to get something done and I'm not patient. It's like realizing that it's absolute and I just continue doing service in a different way and it will come, something's going to happen. That's how I've always dealt with that. Helps me. We're about out of time, so you can ask me after. Hare Krishna, all glory to Srila Prabhupada.